Balance there. Up next, the Republican effort to keep blacks from voting. Restrictions are on the trial right now in North Carolina today. It's a case that could have national implications. You know, I don't like them doing this stuff, making it harder for African Americans to vote, seemingly, well, apparently on purpose. And this is Hardball, the place for politics.
This act flows from a clear and simple wrong. Its only purpose is to right that wrong. Millions of Americans are denied the right to vote because of their color. This law will ensure them the right to vote.
Welcome back. That was, of course, President Lyndon Johnson. The signing of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Nearly 50 years later, the fight for fair access to the voting booth obviously continues. A federal trial down in Winston-Salem, North Carolina began today in order to figure out whether sweeping changes to voting laws down there passed by the state's Republican-controlled legislature in 2013 discriminates against African-American voters. The laws reduced the numbers of early voting days from 17 down to 10. It eliminates same-day registration during early voting. They prohibit counting ballots cast by voters in the incorrect precinct, and they eliminate the pre-registration process of 16 and 17-year-olds that would automatically register them by the time they turn 18, which is legal to vote. The plaintiffs who filed suit against the state of North Carolina say that these laws unfairly target minority communities, making it harder for them to vote. The state's governor, Pat McCrory, says it's not about politics.
I think it's common sense laws, and I think it's much ado about nothing and try to protect the integrity of the voter booth.
Well, Laura Coates is a former assistant U.S. attorney. She also served in the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. Laura, thank you for coming on. Why would it, well, let me try to see if you even imagine what the argument is of the governor there. Why does cutting down on early voting days, especially getting rid of one of the Sundays, why does that make it safer and cleaner politics? I don't get the ethics factor here that he seems to be talking about.
Well, you can't understand it because there is no basis or justification for it. It's not much ado about nothing. When you cut the early voting dates down from 17 to 10 days or less, when you know that the black population that's voting in North Carolina predominantly votes early, and in that first week of early voting, there is no justification to explain how it could not impact negatively and very negatively the black voting population of North Carolina and others. It's not just a black issue or a white issue. The early voting is put into place to make it all the more convenient for people to have access to the polls, especially people who are lower income, who have hard time getting transportation to get to the voting booth early. They have a very big need for why this sort of early voting needs to be in place and be intact.
It seems to me, looking at it historically, you had the poll tax, you had literacy tests, all aimed at the same goal, reducing the voting potential or ease with which minorities vote. In the old days, it was just rotten, you know, spell something in Greek or whatever the heck the old tricks were. And the tax was clearly a way to limit voting. It just seems that it's what the Dixiecrats used to do in the old bad days. The Republicans have picked up one.
It's exactly right. I mean, the arguments have been used to show support for why these post-2013 laws should be okay and why they're not harmful to the black community and minority voters in general, is that they're saying they're facially neutral. But all the types of laws you just stated, poll taxes, literacy tests, those are all facially neutral. The issue is that they are designed to have a negative impact on the ability of voters to be able to not only access the voting, the ballots, but also to undermine their ability to have a meaningful vote. Because what you're doing is not only allowing them to have another barrier in place to why they can't get to the voting place, they're also having a barrier for how it's actually counted. This is very, very similar to the legacy of cases that were in place that the Voting Rights Act were designed to strike down and do away with.
You know that phrase, you're an attorney, you know the phrase, undue burden. I think they should get rid of the undue burden when it comes to voting. Laura Coates, it's great having you on. Thank you. Please come back.
Thank you so much.
Up next, Donald Trump steals a page from the Nixon playbook, calling for support of what he calls the silent majority. So just who are these voters out there who make up Trump's constituency? You'll find that interesting when you get back, because